The Nets go into Milwaukee and gasp, actually keep one close against the Bucks, even holding a lead late that eventually slips away to Giannis and company. We're going to talk about the game, the effort that they showed, and how this one just barely slipped away at the end. We'll get into it all, but first, the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am Doug Norrie, owner-operator, DFSR.com. If you need projections, FanDuel, DraftKings, got you covered over there, DFSR.com. Want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Coming to you post game here following a Nets loss to the Bucks in Milwaukee, 114-106. The Bucks are able to end up taking the game in one that went relatively down to the wire. Not exactly, all the way. It was kind of over within probably the last minute or so, but the Nets do make what I would consider to be, at least for this version of the team, a valiant effort and comeback. They were trailing by 20 points at one point in this game, and where it was looking like they had a chance to kind of at least stick in this one late. That is not something we've been able to say about this team recently. We've been sort of even questioning their effort on both ends of the court, just in general, having lost, Orlando, Indiana, Spurs, New Orleans, and so they had lost four in a row. They had lost 6 of their last 7. It was looking at times like they were kind of just checked out. Even the Spurs game goes to OT, but it's against the Spurs. And you're kind of thinking, does this team have any fight left in them? Does this team want to actually still be running it up and down the court every single night? Have they basically checked out on this season? I think those were reasonable questions to ask about this team. I don't know if this game makes you end up shifting all the ways that you think about the Nets over the short term, just out of one game. But for this one, you have to say that a lot of fight was there. Now, some of the guys that pulled them back into this game aren't the guys that we've been talking about a ton this season. But overall, they were down 20. It really looked like all hope was kind of lost early in the game. It looked like they were just going to get run out of the gym once again, even coming out, going into halftime and trailing, right? So it was Milwaukee 60, Nets 44 at halftime. And you're like, okay, well, here we go again, right? This is just gonna be another game, take the L, get to the off season. This team, they can't really hang with teams. Milwaukee's a really good team. They get Giannis back for this one, so they're kind of like a fully realized version of themselves. And Nets came into this game 10.5 point underdogs anyway, so expectations were going to be probably pretty low. And you go into halftime, you're down double digits, and if you're sitting there like I was, you're thinking, oh man, like here we go again. We're gonna go into this. We're gonna go into this post game. We're gonna go, into the post game podcast, and we're gonna have to be talking about how the team just, has really no fight in them. But they come out in the second half, specifically at the very beginning of the second half. They go on the 17-7 run, and they pull themselves back into the game. And now you're thinking, okay, let's see how this goes. Let's not get the hopes too far up. I think that this team has made it so getting your hopes way up is sort of a fool's errand, right? Like, they've had fourth quarter collapses. They've had second half collapses. They've had just kind of games that got away from them, a la the Spurs game that I mentioned a little bit ago. So there's too much of a track record here over the course of the season to get your hopes too far up. It's just been that kind of year, right? Like, we've just been watching this team too much to really start feeling ultra and uber positive about whatever's coming down the pike, because that's just been what's sort of ground into us just over the course of the season. It's been a really, really rough watch, but they do claw back into it in the second half. They are able to get things going in the third quarter to sort of make it a game And I think you do. I think there are things to be able to take from that, right? We got certain guys that were able to get a little bit back on track, like Mikal Bridges, 9 and 19, 6 or 14 from three. He ends up with 24 points. This is, from a shooting and just sort of aggression perspective, this was one of his better games in a while, right? I mean, we've been staring down game logs for Bridges: 17 points, 7 points, 14 points, 15 points. This has been what's happening to him recently on, 13, 8, 16, 11 shots. Like, the usage hasn't really been there, and the shots that he was putting up really weren't going down, right? He was able to come out firing in this game. He looked a little more confident. He was trying to get to the rim a little bit, but for the most part, he was just taking shots from beyond the arc. 14 of his 19 shots were threes, and he ends up finishing with 24 points. It's a good sign overall. I mean, I don't know if we can make any grand proclamations for it, but at least to have him get a little bit back on track after what's been a very, very rough stretch for him was good to see. Cam Thomas, again, 8 for 17, 21 points for him. He does go 0 of 5 for 3. It's hard to put no one's putting blame on him at all here. I mean, he's been really carrying at times the offense. He's been most of the offense for multiple games in a row. So not as efficient of a scoring night for him, especially early where he really struggled to get a shot. He ends up going for 21 points. Both of them had kind of rougher possessions near the end. But again, this is sort of the expectations that we've been that have just kind of come our way with the Nets this season. It's been that kind of year. So they don't really, neither of them put together a ceiling game necessarily from a scoring perspective. But Bridges especially, you're like, okay, finally, hitting some threes. At least some of these things are going down. It's been so long since we've seen that happen for him that really any sort of glimmer at the end of the tunnel here in terms of his scoring is appreciated at this point, even though I think our expectations for around him have lowered to the point where we just don't really expect it any night in and night out. He just hasn't done it consistently enough. He hasn't really put himself into that class. I think the expectations around him have lowered pretty significantly, so that when you do get a game like this, it's almost like being more pleasantly surprised than considering figuring it's the norm. And that's just where we are with Bridges at this point. It's unfortunate. It's a bummer. This season has not worked out the way some folks kind of thought it was going to, with his ascension into the upper ranks of maybe, I don't want to say superstar, but night in and night out scoring threat, maybe a 1-2 punch with Cam Thomas, but that just really hasn't materialized in a way. So to get a decent shooting night for him, one, it kind of sucks to have wasted it in a loss. Wasted is in quotes, I guess, but because these things just haven't come around lately. The last time he scored 20 points was against Cleveland all the way back on the 10th, and they did end up winning that game 120-101, right? So, I mean, it's not 1-1 why they've lost all these games because of his scoring, but it really, really hasn't helped. So he finally gets back on track here with 24 points. But it just ends up not really being enough, and the rest of the team aren't able to overcome this late game sequences, which I do want to talk about because there are some interesting things that sort of happen late game, in a game that kind of got a little chippy, a game that kind of you saw some emotions bubble up, and a game that I think that's, again, just showed more fight. Also want to talk about some of the young guys because they were one of the, if not the reason, the Nets were able to claw back into this thing. We'll get into all that here in a second. Before we get to that, I'll tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Look, right now it's demon time on Prize Picks. You know what we're talking about. You can win up to 100 times your money with as few as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Demons and Goblins, the newest and most exciting way to play a Prize Picks. The squares over there on Prize Picks marked with red demons or marked with green goblins, just going to give you different payouts, right? More or less than sometimes the usual, but that's going to depend on if you're going more or less on some of the projections that Prize Picks is putting up there. You can win up to 100 times your money with as few as 4 correct picks. All you're doing on Prize Picks, you're going more or less on the Prize Picks projection. So NBA, that's points, assists, rebounds, blocks, steals. Prize Picks puts up the projections. You go more or less. You pile those together, get the 4 correct picks. You could throw some red demons or green goblins in there. Like I said, it's up to 100 times your money. They've made this the best way to play daily fantasy. You're not wrangling with salaries. You're not going against sharks in the water. You're just going against the Prize Picks projections. And that is it. You go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA. You're going to get a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use that code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, late game. This game kind of went back and forth in the fourth quarter. We're going to skip ahead to the end, and then I'll go back to the middle to cover some of these younger guys. But did want to talk about some of the stuff that kind of went down late game. There was some, head scratching things that sort of went down for both teams. Specifically, we can point to, I mean, such a clear travel on Giannis later in the game. Now, I don't think this is like ultimately the thing that ended up swinging it away from the Nets, but it was one of those ones where it's in the heat of the moment. You're getting momentum. They had a really nice defensive stand on Giannis. It felt like this was going to be the time where they maybe made a stand and actually like pushed ahead late in the game. And he so clearly travels. I mean, it was egregious. He traveled twice, actually. He gets the ball, he gathers, he takes 2 steps, he moves his pivot foot, then he takes 1 dribble, and it wasn't like Claxton pulled a chair on him, but it was like like Giannis was expecting some contact or some resistance, and when he didn't get it, he stumbles all the way backwards and passes it back out to Damian Lillard, and it was just like, oh my God. I mean, it looked like he took 9 to 11 steps on the play. It was so brutal to not get the call on the travel there, because the Nets had really fought their way all the way back into it. They'd played some really nice defense on him at times. They were able to, basically form a wall, not the whole time against him, but like they were able to kind of speed bump him a little bit. I mean, Giannis only finished with 21 points on 9 and 19 shooting in 35 minutes. I mean, that's not a typical Giannis game, right? Like he's been considerably better than that this year on a game-to-game basis. So to get kind of close to a floor game, not exactly a floor game, but pretty close to a floor game from Giannis, and then to make this like nice defensive sort of stand late, a few defensive stands late against him, but specifically on that play, and to do it so well that he gets confused and travels, and it really should have been a turnover once when he traveled the first time, and then definitely should have been in the travel the second time when he just takes like 5 steps as he stumbles backwards and pass. It was so brutal to not get that call in that moment. And look, I mean, you can't have these moments, these games come down to one sort of missed call on the ref's standpoint. And sometimes basketball games come down to inches or these little finite plays that end up feeling like a lot more. This was one that really felt that way, just because of how the game was going, how the momentum had kind of shifted, how the Nets had slowed Giannis down enough that he wasn't having an enormous impact on the game. And then to take this possession and basically give them a second and then a third chance, because like I said, he traveled twice, to give them 2 separate chances to make something happen on that, which they end up doing and scoring. It was like, and then you could kind of just feel it, right? You're thinking, oh, they don't get this call. They actually got to stop. They actually were able to kind of hold him up there. They get him to travel and they don't get the call, and it kind of sucks. And so after all of the movement there, after all of them being able to kind of like, stop them, get back into the game, and then they just kind of get discombobulated. Like they had a possession late where they were really still fighting to stay in the game, and they get, like, I would call almost the exact opposite of what they want on a possession. You have Mikal, who shot well from 3. You have Cam Thomas, who's kind of been stepping up a little bit in the second half in the scoring department, or just starting to cook a little bit. And you get Claxton in the block, and they've been running a little more offense through him for sure, but they get Claxton in the block. He ends up trying to dribble drive. He gets in there. He gets a shot contested. He somehow gets the rebound. He was able to corral the rebound, doesn't go back up for another quick shot, passes it back out to Dennis Smith Jr., who probably is the second guy on the court you don't really want to do a late possession sort of one-on-one move or one-on-one, just like with whoever his defender is. Like, get it out to Cam, get it out to Mikal, like reset this thing a little bit. We're still in the game here. And I mean, again, like total miracle that they were even able to get the Claxton missed shot back, right? That he's able to fight just to get the rebound. Because even in the moment, the Claxton shot, you're thinking, oh, what are you doing? Like, this is not the shot the Nets want here when they're still in it. They get it back. DSJ gets it, tries to dribble past Dame, and Dame strips it, and that's kind of it. And Dame strips it, and then they come down, and Beasley hits the corner 3, and that was basically the dagger. And it was you're thinking to yourself, man, to get yourself all the way back into this game, to have it be pretty close, to have the chance to kind of slow things down and do something in the half court, like I said, maybe with Cam Thomas, who in situations like this, I think you do kind of want him to have the ball. He's just such a good ISO scorer when it's kind of crunch time and when it's kind of clench time. he's not the worst guy in the league to have like a possession from. He just is that kind of guy. And to not put it in his hands and to instead to go with this Claxton dribble drive back out to a DSJ strip and then run out corner three, game over. Yeah, it was just like when those two things didn't happen back to back, like the travel and that possession were not back to back possessions, but they did sort of, I thought, signify the two possessions on either end that kind of signaled that the Nets it wasn't going to happen for them. And the Giannis one was with too much time left. I think it was like 3 minutes left that happened. This other one was about with a minute left. It puts them up 6 or it puts them up 7. And you kind of know it's over at that point. Like, Nets have to call a timeout. The momentum is completely shifted. They get this run out for the 3. And it just, at that point, you kind of can feel that the Nets aren't going to get back into it. It's a 5-point. I mean, not like the Nets were going to score in this possession, but it's essentially a 5-point shift. And it just doesn't, it feels like the tables have kind of turned away from the Nets in a way that was going to make it so they couldn't get back into it. But it's funny with how the Nets have operated this season, right? Because they've shot themselves in the foot a ton. Obviously, they've had some things just kind of go against them. I think that is what happens, 70, 80 games during a year. You play this many games and you're just going to have some things go in your favor and some things not. You're going to have sometimes decisions are going to get in your way and sometimes decisions are going to go for you. Obviously, the Nets have had more go wrong this year than right. That's not a hot take or anything. It's just very clear when you just look at the standings and everything else. But watching those possessions late, and then they missed a couple shots late, like Cam Johnson misses a 3 and they missed a couple other shots. And I guess there was a few other chances where they could have gotten back into it and kind of just bricked everything at the end. And that's kind of told the story. But when I was just watching that possession between the Giannis travel, between the Claxton, this is the last kind of possession you want to have him dribbling from outside the restricted area, outside the key, into the restricted area to take a contested shot against the defender, into a DSJ, trying to cook his defender kind of thing. You're like, oh, geez. I mean, of course, this is how this is going to happen. How do we think this is going to go any other way? And like I said, they had other chances. There were other shots. Those two moments in the game weren't the ultimate defining ones. But sometimes you can pinpoint certain things that happen and say to yourself, once I've seen this happen, it's going to be hard for me to see how they're able to do it, because the Nets have no margin for error with this stuff. They're not good enough. They don't have enough talent. They don't have enough effort. Like, their margins for them are so thin. They just can't afford to really make mistakes. They kind of need at this point almost everything to go right for them in order to even stay in the game. And so the expectation here is that when those other little things go wrong, like, they're not able to survive it or endure it the same way some other teams are, just because that's just not the way they're built. They just there's not enough, like I said, there's not enough room for error for them to really be making mistakes like that. So when it does happen, it's really hard to see a path for victory. All right. I do want to talk about some of the young guys, because we did get extended looks here at Noah Clowney, got Jalen Wilson in there, a little bit of a youth movement, and that youth movement was what was able to pull them back into the game. Talk about that here in a second. All right, before we get into that, I'll tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle, leveled up to peak performance, superchargers. They got roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, so much more. If you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. They got 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You always find exactly what you're looking for. The eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts at the prices you need, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, finish it off talking about Noah Clowney, Jalen Wilson, and the group that was able to actually get them back into this game. Jalen Wilson, plus 11 in 11 minutes. Noah Clowney, plus 10 in 14 minutes. These guys were part of the group that in the third quarter and into the fourth was able to pull the Nets back into the game, no doubt about it. I mean, those guys plus minus tell us kind of the story. Sometimes plus minus is it doesn't tell you everything you need to know. But in this one, it like represented near 1-to-1 the time in the game where the Nets were able to get back into it. And some interesting stuff here. So for starters, we saw Noah Clowney, who made the trip to Milwaukee here right off the 2A coming out of the G League, where he's been really, really good for Long Island this year. And he was the backup big and not Day'Ron Sharpe, which is a really interesting move for the Nets to make here late in the season, right? Like, I don't know if this is just the Milwaukee thing or if this is just a rest of the season thing. I mean, it's going to be something that we're going to want to keep an eye on because look, we've been really impressed with the growth from Day'Ron Sharpe this year. We've also wanted to see Noah Clowney. There's been a thought like, hey, Clowney can kind of stretch the floor. He can shoot threes. Like, can these guys, like, could Clowney play the 4? Does he have to be a center? Could they play the 4 and maybe get on the court with some of these other bigs? I think that remains to be seen. The Nets haven't seemed to, I mean, they really haven't played Clowney at all. So it's actually a little difficult to know exactly what the plan here is with him. But is he more like a stretch 5? Is there a stretch 4 stuff in him? He's probably not in the end, but we'll see. But it was interesting that he was the first rotation center to come in here and not Day'Ron Sharpe, who was DNP CD in this game. Like, he didn't play at all. Which is interesting. I don't know. Again, what do we take from it? We'll probably know over the next couple games, like what the plan here is for the Nets. But you have to be pretty impressed what you saw with Clowney tonight. Very active, had a couple really nice defensive stances, especially with interior stuff. Didn't look completely overwhelmed, was able to fire up 4 threes. Like, you really like to see that, 4 threes in 14 minutes. We'll take that all day, right? Get a little stretch stuff in our life when it comes to guys, especially bigs, that are going to be able to stretch the court a little bit. And he has been hitting the threes in Long Island. So if you think that's going to translate here, I mean, he clearly wasn't hesitating to take it. Like I said, 4 threes in 14 minutes. I think that's a great sign. He only hit one of them, corner 3, in the first half. But ultimately, I think we just want to see a guy who's just for starters, a guy who's willing to take them. And I think that's going to be a pretty important thing for him to be able to do. Like we said that coming out of the draft, or like for him to realize some real upside, like that's going to have to be part of his game. He's not an enormous guy. He's super long, pretty athletic, and looks like he has pretty good instincts, especially around the rim defensively. But ultimately, a guy at his size is going to have to hit threes. Like, he's not going to be your standard modern center. He's going to have to be kind of a stretch guy. And we saw some of that from him in college, but not tons. And he didn't shoot the lights out in college or anything, but there were attempts there. So coming out of the draft, we're like, okay, hey, this is going to be something he's going to need to do. I don't want to overreact to 14 minutes here, but I do wonder if like this is going to be part of the Nets plan going forward, or at least sort of situationally, right? Like to kind of put him in different spots, or if we're going to see more combinations where they run him off with another big, like with Claxton or with Day'Ron Sharpe. But ultimately, what they need to see, what I think, like, because we haven't seen tons of Clowney here at the with the big club, it's been mostly Long Island stuff. Just his willingness to shoot that shot, I think, is a great sign. Great sign. Like, they need that. They're going to need that going forward. They haven't had guys that either unable to or unwilling to take this, even just like that sheer number of threes in that period of time. Like, obviously Day'Ron hasn't done it. Obviously Claxton hasn't done it. Not comparing Clowney to those guys 1-to-1, but just saying in terms of like modern NBA, what's really important for your big to be able to do. If your big can stretch the court, it just opens up a whole new world of different stuff that you can run on the offensive end. So I thought it was a really, really nice sign for him. Like I said, he didn't look overwhelmed by the game. He didn't look like it was moving too fast for him. He looked like he was really getting into just the lay of the land on an NBA level, because we've seen him at times, but it's been a lot of garbage time and stuff like that. Like, this was real minutes against their real guys, right? The Portises, the Giannis's of the world. Like, he was in there facing up against those groups. So that's getting thrown into the fire. About as difficult matchups as you can really find in the NBA. They had tried to match Claxton's minutes 1-on-1 with Giannis early, but Clowney did get a few defensive looks there. So I think that was a really, really nice sign. I do think that we're probably going to see more of him down the stretch here. I hope it doesn't come completely at the expense of not playing Sharpe at all. Like, I would be I don't know if it'd be concerning, but it would be surprising if like the Sharpe just stopped playing here. So I'm kind of hoping it was just a matchup thing because of Brook Lopez and Giannis and just like the very specific problem that the Bucks bring to you on the defensive end. but that will remain to be seen. Like, I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen going forward. I hope we're just able to see all these guys, because I think you have to be really, really encouraged by what you saw. And then Jalen Wilson, I mean, just a couple great hustle plays tonight. The things that he's been pretty much doing since he has been playing, which is like, has a good nose for the ball, can get physical at the right time, very good rebounder, had an awesome offensive rebound that kept him in the game late. He probably should have had a steal late that he ended up getting pushed out of bounds on. I think he probably got screwed a little bit there on a lot of contact. He had really anticipated the entry pass. It was like sort of a elbow extended entry pass from Lillard. He anticipated it. He actually stole it and then got pushed out of bounds, and they called him out of bounds, what probably should have been a foul. Not to say that that would have turned the game either, but it was really good anticipation. So he had that play. He had another almost steal. He had a great offensive rebound, like I said, late in the game that kept him in there. So yeah, only 11 minutes from Jalen Wilson, but I thought they were really impactful. I think that was sort of the story of what he was bringing. Like Clowney and Wilson, look, they combined for 25 minutes. Like I said before, plus 10 and plus 11 respectively. But they were part of that group that got the Nets back into the game. They were part of the group that kind of just, the moment wasn't too big for them. Their energy clearly was something the team has been dying to have. Like, they've been so low energy at times late in these games, or just, I mean, kind of sometimes throughout the whole game, so low energy, and it's just let the games get away from them. But like, look, they brought these young guys in, and to the point where even on the call, there was some questioning about whether they should have just kept him in, right? That's how well that group was playing. Like, should they have closed with it? I wouldn't have done that. I think that sometimes misses the forest for the trees a little bit. Like, you want to have team effort, and you ultimately want to have your best five close the game, even if another group has played pretty well. But the fact that it was even brought up was a testament to really how well they played. So overall, like what you saw from Clowney, like what you saw from Jalen Wilson, hopefully we're going to continue to see more of that on these like sort of mini development opportunities, because we know like this season's kind of lost for the Nets. We know that at this point, right? No one has false hopes around really what's happening. So being able to see a little bit of what they got there with some of these young guys, Clowney specifically, hopefully that's a theme that we're going to continue to see. So ultimately, Nets do not pull this one out. 115 to 108 bucks. Take it. They fought there at the end, but ultimately were not able to do it. Hey, that's the story. That's been kind of the story for the Nets season. They fought 26 and 44 on the season. 12 more games to go, folks. 12 more games in this Nets season. All right, we're going to get out of here. Much appreciated. Everyone that's still kind of chugging along with us on YouTube, chugging along on the podcast, make sure you subscribe and listen wherever you listen to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube as well. Always get to this part of these solo episodes. I remember that Adam is always the one that's always able to bring the quotes from the all-time great poets. So, as always, Adam Armbrecht, we missed you today. We'll say Adam Armbrecht, one of the all-time great poets. We're back again next time, talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.